What does it take to be a private investigator? Let's take a deep dive into this. First, let's look at the education and training that's needed to be a private investigator. At the very minimum, you're going to need a high school diploma or at least an equivalent. Now, outside of licensing, I don't think there's any requirement that's out there. A lot of states have licensing, and they're going to have that as a minimum requirement of education. Now, if your state doesn't have licensing, then it's not necessarily really a requirement. But if you don't have at least a high school diploma or equivalent, you may not have the education to be able to do a lot of the other things. And a lot of people may not take you as seriously being a private investigator without some level of formal education. Now, I often encourage people that are looking to become a private investigator to look at a potential degree in something like criminology or even law enforcement or a related field. Not that it's always required, but it can often help you down the road to have that background information and that background training. And if you can go out there and get some coursework, if you can take some classes on law enforcement procedures, investigative techniques, surveillance methods, interviewing and interrogation skills, computer forensics, anything like that, whatever field you're looking at going into, if you can get some advanced education in that, even if it's online courses, not necessarily a degree, that could help a heck of a lot too. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. Now, a big way to get some of the education in that is if your state has a private investigators association, and I think just about every state out there has a private investigators association, become a member of that association. A lot of them, even if you don't have any experience being a private investigator, a lot of them will have like an associates type of a membership or an entry-level membership where you can join them and then you can start taking those classes to get that education. And of course, the big thing is licensing and certification. Almost every state in the United States has some kind of private investigator licensing program out there. You need to check with your state. You need to find out what the requirements for that license is or certification. I think most are licenses anymore, but you need to know what those requirements are and make sure that you can meet those requirements. Now, to get those licenses, a lot of times you're going to have to take some kind of training. You're going to have to go through a background check. You're probably going to have to do some kind of a test, a jurisprudence test, and other types of tests to make sure that you know everything there is about being a private investigator in that state. And that's where being a member of your state PI association comes in really handy, because most of those will have some kind of formal training that helps you obtain that license, or at least find out what it takes to get that license. And you can talk to other private investigators to see if they can help you get that licensing. You see, in a lot of states, you have to work as a PI to be a PI. It kind of sounds counterintuitive, but in order to get a PI license, you actually have to have worked as a private investigator for some period of time, be it 2,000 hours, 4,000 hours, 6,000 hours, whatever the licensing regulations state. So what that means is you will have to go out and work as a private investigator for a private investigations firm. So you're essentially working under their license. You don't have your own license yet. And most licensing has something called CEs, or continuing education, that you have to do. So you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to take certain classes, and you're going to have to get a certain amount of continuing education credits to be able to continue your license. Again, in those states with a state private investigators association, many times that PI association will have the means to get you that continuing education. And that continuing education not only helps you keep your license up to date, but it also helps to keep you up to date with the best practices and all of the knowledge of new technologies and new means of doing investigations from one year to the next. One of the biggest things out there you also need to is insurance and bonding. And most licenses out there now require you to at least have a bond, and a lot of them are requiring you to have some type of insurance coverage too. Now, if you have insurance as a private investigator, it's most likely going to be errors and omissions insurance or liability insurance for you and your company. Now, that insurance protects you. It doesn't protect your client, it protects you. So if somebody sues you or something goes horribly wrong during an investigation, that's what that insurance is for. Now, most states that have PI licensing are going to have a requirement for a bond. The big difference between insurance and a bond, that insurance covers you, that bond covers your client. So if you do something wrong, if you run off with the client's retainer, or you do anything wrong in the investigation that harms the client, they can then go after that bond. So make sure you're looking at both insurance and bond. Now, if you don't have licensing requirements to have a bond, chances are the insurance company is not going to let you carry a bond. They only usually do that if there's a requirement like in licensure. Let's go over some key skills and qualities that you kind of need to have or need to be working on, you need to shore up to be a private investigator. The first is strong analytical and problem-solving skills. After all, you're going to be a private investigator. You're going to be a detective. You're going to be out there solving problems. You need to be able to have that strong analytical skill and that problem-solving skill to be able to do that. You need to be able to look at a situation and kind of tell what's going on fairly quickly. You need to be able to go through discovery in a case and be able to read through everything and analyze it and know how to separate it all out and figure out how it all fits together so you can then formulate an investigation. You also need to have excellent communication and interpersonal skills. You are going to be communicating with your clients. You are going to be communicating with witnesses. You are going to be communicating sometimes with judge, jury, and the other side as they have you up on the stand and they're doing cross-examination. If you have poor communication skills, that is going to reflect poorly upon you as a private investigator, and it's also going to be detrimental to your entire case. A big one that a lot of people don't realize is you have to have the ability to work independently and under pressure. And that's key because a lot of times you're working all alone and you're under a lot of pressure and you don't really have any supervision. You have to be able to do that all on your own. I have seen it. It's really easy for new PIs to be like, oh, this is too much. I'm not going to take this step. Oh, I've got a deadline. I've got to do this, so I'm going to skip these steps, and then they end up messing up the entire investigation. And physical stamina is another one of those things. There's a lot of long hour days, especially if you're doing surveillance. You can find yourself sitting in a car for 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. I have had cases where I literally practically lived in my car for 3 or 4 days. On occasion with those cases, I would end up taking some kind of a break, to be able to obviously go to the bathroom and things like that. I might be able to check into a hotel for a short period of time so I can get a shower. But a lot of times I'm sitting in my car for very, very, very long periods of time. And then there's proficiency in computerese, if you will, for private investigators today. Most PIs are going to have to deal with things like Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, database management systems, different things like that, and video editing software. A lot of stuff happens on a computer for a private investigator today. We're not always grabbing our Big Chief tablet and our number 2 pencil and writing up a report to the client today. We have to put together these nice, fancy, well-formatted reports with pictures in there and clear documentation verbally of what happened during the investigation. And then there's all the equipment that we have to know how to run. Things like video cameras, photographic cameras, audio recorders, different things like that. So you really have to have some kind of technological skills to be a private investigator today. And then experience. Experience really does matter being a private investigator. Obviously, you don't have to have a lot of investigative experience to get started. But if you have some, it really, really does help. And if you get involved with your state PI association, again, you might be able to find some internship jobs out there. You might be able to find some volunteer positions, whether it's with law enforcement or another private investigations firm or something like that. You can start to build a portfolio of cases where you can demonstrate your skills and your expertise. It's always better to be able to talk the talk if you have walked the walk, because in this world, we're all private investigators. We can usually tell when we're talking to somebody whether they're just talking the talk, but they've never walked the walk. Networking with other professionals is key in the field of private investigations, and that's another reason to get involved with your state PI association. You're going to find job opportunities there. You're going to find out what the best practices for different types of investigations are. And one of the key things that I learned when I started out new and I first got involved with my state PI association was just talking with people. I could actually start to work on my interviewing skills, or more, I should say, my perception skills, just talking with people and learning more about their business. Now, in my personal opinion, probably the most overlooked and the most important area of knowledge for a private investigator is in the world of business. Most new PIs know nothing about marketing. They know nothing about advertising. They know nothing about going out and attracting clients, doing sales with clients, communicating with clients, and retaining clients. Financial management is probably the biggest failure for private investigators today. In fact, here's a little secret. Financial management is probably one of the biggest failure areas for most new businesses. So you need to understand accounting. You need to know how to do that, or you hire an accounting firm to do that. Time management is another area where a lot of new PIs fail. They just assume things are going to take this much time, and they take a considerable amount more time. As well, organizational skills. If you're not well organized, if you don't know how to keep track of everything, it can get very overwhelming very quick. It's very easy to go ho-hum 1 or 2 cases a week, and then all of a sudden you've got 10, 15, 20 cases on your desk, and you need to have those great organizational skills and time management skills to be able to get through all of that work. Part of being a private investigator means you need to put together contracts with your clients. You need to invoice your clients. You need to figure out how you're going to deal with accounts receivable, accounts payable, things like that. Now, here's a big secret for you. I highly recommend that ARs, accounts receivable, are a non-existent thing in your company. I've got a lot of videos that talk to that subject. I've even written some books about how to run your PI business, so you might want to check those out as well so you can get some more information, because you can run a private investigations business without ever carrying any accounts receivables. And of course, whatever tools you have as a private investigator, whether it's dash cams or hidden cameras or video cameras or audio recorders or your computer, your laptop, whatever it is, you need to be familiar with it and know how to use it all the time. You need to understand how to use all those online tools at your disposal too. As a private investigator, you should have 2 or 3 professional online databases that you subscribe to. And each one of those databases works a little differently. They all look similar, but they'll have different information a lot of times. I have ran somebody in one database and come up with one address that says current, run them in another, it says another, and then a third, and I even come up with a third. I need to be able to take all of that data and analyze it and figure out what address or what phone number or what piece of information is actually accurate. And you need to know how to verify that information. You can go on all those PI databases out there and you can get a long list of criminal activity on a subject, but is it accurate? I have seen many times where it's not accurate because I verified that information. You need to know how to verify that information, and you need to make sure that you verify all the information that you find, whether it's on a database or you find it on a social media site. You need to make sure that you are able to verify its accuracy. Another big thing that a lot of new PIs don't ever consider is the emotional demands of being a private investigator. It can be very emotionally demanding if you are working a lot of child custody cases, if you are working a lot of divorce cases, you're going to get yourself involved, or at least see, not necessarily involved, but at least see lots of the and the yuck out there in the world. And if you're doing criminal defense, boy, I tell you what, that can bring a lot of emotional demands on you as well. And make sure you stay up to date on industry developments and best practices in the private investigations industry. So attend those conferences and workshops that your state PI association puts on. And you can stay tuned here at the PI Guy channel. I'm always trying to come up with new topics to be able to talk about to help keep you educated. In fact, if you want to learn more about what it takes to be a private investigator, then check out this video.